to our first video since the dawn of the new world.
This is OV3RT-19 and you better remain indoors.
So after extended lockdown, the whole army deployed for, at the time of this edit, 7,220 cases and 138 COVID-related deaths. Nice colored charts we have to learn now that governs our behavior, and some people now predicting 50% unemployment soon. A lot of people have been remarking for a few weeks now that everything doesn't feel quite right to them. And I'm not going to pretend to have all the answers, but maybe I can show you a few things you haven't seen before together in one place, and you can put the pieces together yourself. It's not illegal to think yet. What, you thought things like this just happen spontaneously by accident? What do I mean, OV3RT-19? This channel is dedicated to uncovering UN Agenda 21, and we will be looking at how a very small group of people and organizations have used this event we're living through now to advance some UN Agenda 21 Sustainable Development Goals that affects the lives of every single one of us, especially now, since the age of OV3RT-19. But first, on 18 October 2019, that's just last year, the Johns Hopkins Center for Health and Security, in partnership with the World Economic Forum and the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, hosted the Event 201 Pandemic Tabletop exercise in New York. Let's have a look at how this simulation was framed and see if any of this feels familiar to you.
The mission of the Pandemic Emergency Board is to provide recommendations to deal with the major global challenges arising in response to an unfolding pandemic. The board is comprised of highly experienced leaders from business, public health, and civil society.
It began in healthy-looking pigs, months, perhaps years ago. A new coronavirus spread silently within herds. Infected people got a respiratory illness with symptoms ranging from mild flu-like signs to severe pneumonia. The sickest required intensive care. Many died. Experts agree, unless it is quickly controlled, it could lead to a severe pandemic, an outbreak that circles the globe and affects people everywhere.
How should national leaders, businesses, and international organizations balance the risk of worsening disease that would be caused by the continued movement of people around the world against the risks of profound economic consequence of travel and trade bans? So the policy question for this board now is, how should financial resources be prioritized? Are there nodes that we cannot allow to fail? What is your sense of priorities? We don't have money to pay for all of these urgent problems.
We could be looking at double the number of cases in 1 week and 16 times as many in a month if we are not able to stop the spread. That would be on the order of 500,000 cases, and it would continue to rise exponentially. In 3 months, we could be approaching 10 million cases.
Yeah. You can go look at the full highlights reel of this exercise on YouTube if you feel like a summary of the last 3 months. But there are a few things from this exercise I'd like to show you.
How much control of information should there be, and by whom? And how can false information be effectively challenged? And what if that false information is coming from companies or from governments?
Haha, misinformation, indeed.
And I can see how the WHO's response to the coronavirus could also be confusing, because it's hard to understand how the main global organization charged with handling it could have screwed up so badly. According to Lawrence Gostin, a professor of global health law at Georgetown University, who also provides technical assistance to the WHO, we were deceived. Myself and other public health experts, based on what the World Health Organization and China were saying, reassured the public that this was not serious, that we could bring this under control.
To be fair, there were some sensible people at the Event 201 exercise.
I personally do not believe that trying to shut things down in terms of information is either practical or desirable. And we do have, I think, a couple of strategies that are available to us, one of which is the flood strategy, second of which is relying and informing and equipping trusted sources of information with the facts so they can then pass that on.
Informing and equipping trusted sources of information with the facts so that they can pass it on. That sounds like a brilliant idea. We're going to briefly talk about chloroquine. We've published 3 articles on chloroquine on our Facebook page since early March, and you can go look them up there to see some history to this. We're going to talk about some new developments on chloroquine that happened since then. But just to stress why this point is important to our OV3RT-19 story, it will be quite evident by the end of this brief summary that there is definitely a group of people who do not want anybody to know how effective chloroquine and hydroxychloroquine are at treating the disease that shut down the world. Many people still don't know about it, haven't heard about it, and the World Health Organization still, until today, the 4th of May 2020, does not recognize it as an effective treatment. Why would someone hide information like this? Surely it's easy to see that this would increase fear and panic, something the World Health Organization and media and politicians around the world have claimed that they do not want to happen. If you can make people more scared than they need to be, you can do things to them that they would otherwise not allow. President Trump has been under quite a bit of fire for even daring to suggest that hydroxychloroquine could be used to treat coronavirus patients. The press is very unhappy that he is talking about things that their little revered bureaucracies did not rubber stamp, and that he is telling their little bureaucracies to do their jobs. Articles like this one even seems to suggest that it is some crazy right-wing conspiracy theory. The media has since gone on some strange campaign to pretend that President Trump is promoting the use of hydroxychloroquine on a thumbsuck with little or no evidence to back it up. But let's see if this idea is even close to the truth. Was Trump the instigator of this line of investigation? Or were the World Health Organization, the CDC and the FDA once again not doing their jobs, and he was simply pointing it out? On 15 Feb, a group of French researchers published a paper in the International Journal of Antimicrobial Agents called Chloroquine for the 2019 novel coronavirus SARS-CoV-2. One of the authors, Professor Didier Raholt, a prominent infectious disease expert, explains.
Chloroquine and hydroxychloroquine have been shown to be efficient against intracellular bacteria and against virus. And 20 years ago, a review was proposing this as antiviral, and we wrote a review 13 years ago proposing to use hydroxychloroquine or chloroquine as an antiviral compound. So I proposed this treatment 25 years ago, which is in all the reference book of the world, treating by an association of hydroxychloroquine and doxycycline for disease such as Q fever or Whipple's disease.
On 18 Feb, Clinical Trials Arena reported that early data from clinical trials being performed in China revealed chloroquine phosphate could help treat the new coronavirus disease COVID-19, and that patients treated with chloroquine phosphate demonstrated a better drop in fever, improvement of lung CT images, and required shorter time to recover compared to parallel groups. On 26 February, the UK government banned the export and hoarding of chloroquine, and they added hydroxychloroquine to the list on 14 March. On 19 March, Business Insider Australia reported that other countries, including China, South Korea and Belgium, have added it to their COVID-19 treatment guidelines, and also reported on ongoing trials in Mexico on patients, as well as trials on health workers to see if it could possibly be used as a prophylactic. And they're not the only ones testing the prophylactic hypothesis. Also on 19 March, Professor Didier Raholt's team published the results of their first small trial in the Journal of Antimicrobial Agents. And then later on the same day, President Trump breaks the media by directing the FDA to investigate hydroxychloroquine. This is not an idea that President Trump just grabbed out of thin air. The latest media tactic to try and discredit what could possibly be a very effective treatment for what seems to be the most serious disease we've ever faced, since we've had to shut down the whole world economy for it, is a story that Trump owns a small financial interest in a company that makes hydroxychloroquine. Stop the presses! This very much reminds me of a meme that we saw not too long ago. Remember this? But another very interesting thing happened on the chloroquine front. While President Trump is not allowed to talk about chloroquine, other governments were acting on it, and the Asia Times asked on 28 March, why is France hiding a cheap and tested virus cure? The article asks about the mysterious disappearance, more likely outright theft, of all the stocks of chloroquine in possession of the French government. On January 13, France's health minister classifies chloroquine as a poisonous substance, from now on only available by prescription, even though it has been sold off the shelf in France for half a century. January 13? Is that how long the French government knew that there could be something that could help people?
This is OV3RT-19.
How many people died since then?
Remain indoors.
A week after Professor Didier Raoult and his team published their first small trial treating patients with hydroxychloroquine and azithromycin, the French Health Ministry officially prohibited the utilization of treatment based on chloroquine recommended by Raoult. In fact, the treatment is only allowed for terminal COVID-19 patients. What does arguably the world's #1 expert in communicable disease say about this guideline? When damage to the lungs is too important and patients arrive for reanimation, they practically do not harbor viruses in their bodies anymore. It is too late to treat them with chloroquine. Are these the only ones, the very serious cases that will be treated with chloroquine under the new directive by Varane, the French health minister? If so, he added ironically, then they will be able to say with scientific certainty that chloroquine doesn't work. But what does he know? He's not a politician. Dr. Vladimir Zelenko treated over 700 coronavirus patients in New York by the end of March with a slightly adapted version of Professor Raoult's regimen. Dr. Zelenko echoes Professor Raoult's politically very incorrect opinion on how and when to treat coronavirus with hydroxychloroquine and azithromycin.
So listen, Sean, the main issue is here like this. That once ARDS kicks in, that's basically there's tremendous cell damage and there's cytotoxic chemicals being released in the lung, destroying the lungs. And these drugs won't even help then, probably. What we need to do is decrease the viral load and give the immune system time to overcome the infection prior to ARDS developing. All I did was take established regimens and just apply them in the pre-hospital setting when their patients have mild to moderate symptoms. And I've seen remarkable results. It really prevents the progression of the disease and patients get better.
What else do we have? Democratic lawmaker says hydroxychloroquine saved a life. And Dr. Stephen Smith, founder of the Smith Center for Infectious Diseases and Urban Health, told Fox News on 2 April,
Laura, I think this is the beginning of the end of the pandemic. I'm very serious.
The beginning of the end of the pandemic? Who is spreading the misinformation here, Who? These globalist septic tanks think you are idiots.
That's the spirit, unknown male 282.
And what if that false information is coming from companies or from governments?
After everything you've just seen on chloroquine and hydroxychloroquine, is this statement by the World Health Organization really a reflection of the truth? Or would a more truthful statement have been something like, although more high-quality trials are required to confirm the effectiveness, initial results from human trials in several countries with chloroquine or hydroxychloroquine appear very promising, reporting better management of fever, prevention of exacerbation of pneumonia, improving of lung imaging findings, promoting a virus-negative conversion, and shortening the disease course. What could the motivation possibly be for the World Health Organization to put out the message that there is no effective treatment at all, when it is clearly reported to have a beneficial effect, if used correctly, from all over the world? How much different would the tolerance of people and perhaps the media have been around the world for the, let's just say, excessive measures we've seen some governments take, if the World Health Organization simply told people that there seems to be a cheap, well-known drug that seems to be effective in treating COVID-19. But see, then you wouldn't have the same levels of global panic. Just one last thing before we move on. Last minute edition. The media freaked out recently over the Trump disinfectant statement that I'm sure most of you had shoved down your throat by now, repackaged in cases. Maybe the media is just unaware that we routinely inject infants with a disinfectant called formaldehyde, which is in many childhood vaccines. Maybe they're just ignorant of ultraviolet blood irradiation therapy that has been around since the 1940s and has been used for treating various diseases including septicemia, pneumonia and polio. Or maybe they're just pushing an agenda and following orders to deflect attention away from anything that isn't a vaccine. On that note, I really think our local broadcasters should be careful of not spreading fake news. I heard on an SABC news broadcast some expert mocking Trump about the UV light, saying it is impossible and you would fry a person. Careful guys, you could get in trouble for spreading fake news these days. Ultraviolet blood irradiation therapy was extensively used in the 1940s and 50s to treat many diseases including septicemia, pneumonia, tuberculosis, arthritis, asthma and even polio. And I really recommend you go read this very interesting paper on the NIH website entitled Ultraviolet Blood Irradiation Therapy: Is it Time to Remember the Cure That Time Forgot? But here's the point about all that. Yet another possibly effective treatment that is not a vaccine that you're not supposed to look at. It should be obvious by now that the effectiveness of chloroquine and hydroxychloroquine have been hidden globally by
trusted sources of information.
The fear and panic that goes with the perception that there is no treatment enables the introduction of a lot of the draconian measures we've seen introduced globally. And a bunch of billionaires and the media and researchers they fund, and in some cases the governments they fund, are now telling us that the world have changed. The world we knew as recently as January is gone, they say, and we have to get used to a new normal. But that's enough on hiding treatments. Let's now see how the increased fear and panic gained from this is now being used to promote sustainable development agendas that have been coming at us for a long time.
Don't wear a mask, wear a mask. Go jogging, but only in the morning. No more than 3 in a car. Sit on your hands, stand on one leg.
Chow down on a protein fudge. Take whatever injections are recommended in your sector to remain indoors.
And let's meet our contestants. First, we're going to start with this guy. Anthony Fauci is all over the media headlines as one of the faces on Trump's coronavirus task force. He is referred to in the media mostly as the director of the National Institute of Allergies and Infectious Diseases, part of the National Institute of Health, where he has served since 1984. But what the media conveniently forgets to mention is that he has a long-standing relationship with another savior figure we've been seeing all over our screens lately. A familiar one. Yeah, this guy. Fauci was founding partner of the Global Vaccine Action Plan, the collaboration between the World Health Organization, UNICEF, the National Institute of Allergies and Infectious Diseases, Fauci, and the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, obviously, when they launched their Decade of Vaccines in 2010. Fauci served on the Global Leadership Council of the Global Vaccine Action Plan since its founding, so let's just say it should not surprise anybody, except maybe the mainstream media, that this guy and this guy paints the same problems and suggests the same solutions, okay? Let's just leave that there for now to remind you. The Global Vaccine Action Plan is coming to an end in 2020, and we'll get back to that as soon as we complete our little look at the Fauci. According to the Asia Times in 2015, while there was a moratorium on gain-of-function research in the United States, Dr. Fauci outsourced gain-of-function bat coronavirus research to China's Wuhan Institute of Virology with a $3.7 million grant and licensed the lab to continue receiving US government funding. Gain-of-function research involves experimentation that aims or is expected to and or perhaps actually does increase the transmissibility and or virulence of pathogens. Outsourcing research that is illegal in the United States to the Wuhan Institute of Virology with US taxpayer money. By the way, we're talking about the same Fauci that said in a speech at Georgetown University in 2017,
there is no question that there will be a challenge to the coming administration in the arena of infectious diseases, both chronic infectious diseases in the sense of already ongoing disease, and we have certainly a large burden of that, but also there will be a surprise outbreak.
And his associate at the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, where Fauci was on their Global Leadership Council, also said in 2017,
we also face a new threat that the next epidemic has a good chance of originating on a computer screen of a terrorist intent on using genetic engineering to create a synthetic version of the smallpox virus or a contagious and highly deadly strain of flu.
This is OV3RT-19. Remain indoors.
Now that we understand Fauci and his Bill bromance a bit better, we can move on to our Agenda 21 Sustainable Development Goals. As we reminded you earlier in this video, this channel is dedicated to uncovering UN Agenda 21 and its associated policies and programs. And there are two other agendas directly linked to the Agenda 2030 Sustainable Development Goals that could benefit from the perhaps unnecessary level of panic we've seen maintained by the World Health Organization and some of their associates, and the media and experts who receive their funding. The first is a World Health Organization agenda in support of Sustainable Development Goal 3.8 and 3b, and it is called IA 2030. Immunization Agenda 2030, a global strategy to leave no one behind. IA 2030 envisions a world where everyone, everywhere, at every age, fully benefits from vaccines to improve health and well-being. As mentioned earlier, the Global Vaccine Action Plan is coming to an end soon, and as a result, during 2019, the World Health Organization convened a technical consultation process to produce their post-2020 vaccines and immunization vision and strategy. The result was Immunization Agenda 2030, a global strategy to leave no one behind. One of the IA 2030 project management partners is the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation. Obviously. How do I vaccinate myself against Bill Gates?
What's wrong with this thing? It's f***ing Windows 98! Get Bill Gates in here! You told us Windows 98 would be faster and more efficient with better access to the internet!
It is faster, over 5 million.
The second Agenda 2030 program being promoted with OV3RT-19 is a technology program in support of Sustainable Development Goal 16.9 called ID 2020. Some of our followers may have heard of this one before. Sustainable Development Goal 16.9 aims by 2030 to provide legal identity for all, including birth registration. According to the United Nations High Commission on Refugees, a digital identity can facilitate access to essential services, aid countries in distribution of social benefits, and open up formal financial tools to the world's 2 billion unbanked people, also known as people who under the current system wouldn't pay carbon tax. The central thing really to remember about this digital identity promoted by the UN and the ID 2020 project is that this digital ID will provide you with access to essential services. It is worth taking note of the requirements ID 2020 have identified for a digital ID, referred to as the 4 Ps: private, portable, persistent, meaning it lives with you from birth to death, and personal, unique to you and only you. The technology to make such a digital ID really personal have existed for a number of years, and we have recently released an article on our Facebook page on such digital tagging technologies, and Mr. Gates once again has his fingers in at least 2 of the technologies in this article, like a Microsoft patent on a cryptocurrency that monitors your body activity and rewards you for good behavior. Yeah, I'm not making that up. Feel free to look up the article on our Facebook page called Sickness, Surveillance and Skepticism, and I'll also place a link in the description. If that's not good enough to convince you that the vaccine baron also has a very keen interest in monitoring and surveilling everyone on the planet, we have some more for you. In 2017 and 2018, Mr. Gates backed 2 different projects to blanket the Earth in video surveillance satellites. According to this article in The Independent about the 2017 project called Radiant Earth, these satellites will help in the planning and management of issues such as land tenure, global health, sustainable development, food security, and disaster response. ID 2020's partners include, amongst others, Microsoft, Gavi, the Rockefeller Foundation, who provided the seed funding, and the UN International Computing Center. For those who already have some understanding of Agenda 21 and global governance, that should be all you need to know about ID 2020. For those who are new to all this, you have a lot of catching up to do. Gavi is the Global Alliance for Vaccines and Immunization. It was founded by the World Bank, the World Health Organization, Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, obviously, and Bill Gates calls the $10 billion investment his foundation has in Gavi and 2 other vaccine programs the best investment he has ever made. What is the relationship between ID 2020 and vaccines? In pilot programs, Gavi provide the vaccines, ID 2020's digital ID track the vaccination records of the participants, and it is quite clear to see from the narrative in the OV3RT-19 world we now live in that this record that is tracked by the digital ID will be used to give or deny you certain permissions, like flying, as we'll see. Let's just pause for a second with all the information we've just heard in OV3RT-19 and have a look at what this very small circle of people and organizations are now telling us about our future.
Can you imagine a time where Americans carry certificates of immunity?
You know, that's possible. I mean, it's one of those things that we talk about when we want to make sure that we know who the vulnerable people are and not. This is something that's being discussed. I think it might actually have some merit under certain circumstances.
Eventually, what we'll have to have is certificates of who's a recovered person, who's a vaccinated person, because you don't want people moving around the world. So eventually there will be sort of this digital immunity proof that will help facilitate the global reopening up.
The ultimate solution to a virus that might keep coming back would be a vaccine. In fact, I was on the weekly conference call with the WHO-sponsored group of all the health leaders in the world who are dealing with this. And we all came to the agreement that we may have cycling with another season. We'll be much better prepared. We likely will have interventions. But the ultimate game changer in this will be a vaccine.
Even the issue of once you get the case numbers down, there's a lot of dialogue between our foundation experts and the government now, but what does opening up look like? Which activities like schools, have such benefit and can be done in a way that the risk of transmission is very low?
Yeah.
And which activities like mass gatherings may be, in a certain sense, more optional. And so until you're widely vaccinated, those may not come back at all.
We need to develop a vaccine. We need to produce it and to deploy it in every single corner of the world.
This is besides the fact that we've never been able to make a successful coronavirus vaccine and that trying to make one has so far proved notoriously dangerous because of a well-known phenomenon of antibody-induced enhancement or vaccine-induced enhancement that could make the disease much, much worse than it otherwise would be. Some more interesting trivia on Mr.
I'm an expert on vaccines.
He was elected as a foreign academic to one of China's top educational institutions, the Chinese Academy of Engineering, in 2017. This is a lifelong honor that is expected to build up the institution.
Oh, say no more.
Promote international cooperation and exchanges, as well as improve CAE's status in the field of engineering. Gates also sponsored a paper in 2014 explaining to you that double-blind placebo studies can't be done with vaccines because the argument goes it is unethical to not give people a vaccine if one exists. It literally argues to minimize the use of double-blind placebo studies, which it admits is the gold standard for testing, and that as part of discussions around trial designs, investigators should consider different types of placebo interventions rather than using a true placebo control, an inert substance. It may be appropriate to use a vaccine against a disease that is not the focus of the trial. In other words, use another vaccine as a placebo, also known as the antithesis of a placebo. A placebo is anything that seems to be a real medical treatment but isn't. It could be a pill, a shot, or some other type of fake treatment. What all placebos have in common is that they do not contain any active substance meant to affect health. Either these people are telling you they are abandoning the gold standard for testing, or they are telling you that vaccines don't really do anything for health. Is that overt enough for you? Or are you just going to let some twat on the radio once again tell you this is all a conspiracy theory and that basically you're just too stupid to understand and to just gaslight you into believing that you're not really seeing what you're seeing? Huh? We're going to go for that again. Look, at least admit that if all of this is half as bad as it looks, it's pretty bad. But wait, Trump has a minuscule financial interest in a company that makes hydroxychloroquine. That is the problem. Oh, wait. Who wrote that article? Right. You know what virus I'm way more concerned about right now? The viral fragments of the United Nations Agenda 2030 Sustainable Development Goals, the World Health Organization, billionaires with megalomaniac delusions, and China's social credit score, but worse, forming a chimera to impose its system of managed permissions on countries through willing politicians, revoking your right to economic participation based on whether or not you have their product in or on your body, and how compliant you are with their overall sustainable development agenda, while none of us have ever voted or consented by referendum to any of these. There's one more piece to the OV3RT-19 picture we have to take a look at, the great enabler, 5G. Without this, the full implementation of the globalist agenda is not possible.
4G network, 10,000 devices per square mile. 5G network, 3 million devices per square mile.
10,000 to 3 million?
10,000 to 3 million. That's what 5G does. The connectivity explodes. So all of this is getting built right now in China. And who's helping them do it? Microsoft, Google. What is a 5G world? You may not even carry a smartphone. 5G is computing and networking combined on the same platform.
We'll have a look at what other Agenda 2030 outcomes could await us if we don't resist OV3RT-19, and we'll explore our political options to regain our sovereignty. You'd think in a country like South Africa with 50+ political parties, we'd be spoiled for choice. We'll speak to the leader of the only registered party to explicitly oppose the globalist face-sucker that have been wrecking our country for years on what we've all just witnessed and how to regain our sovereignty.